Welcome back to another episode of the Be the CEO of Your Life and Business podcast. This week, if you can see us on YouTube, Amy and I are together in our Woodcliff Lake, New Jersey office. I love when we can record these together. It's a nice change, and it's nice to be doing it in person instead of staring at each other
on
a screen.
And it's so beautiful. We get so inspired in this office only because we just fangirl over the fact that we have a New York City skyline view and just the entire area around this office is so beautiful
and peaceful,
which we've needed this week.
Which this week has not been.
No.
Which is what we're going to talk about today. Today, I want to talk about sometimes you have to make adjustments to your life and your schedule that you don't want to make, but there are adjustments that are going to help you in the long run. So this week, I was so busy at work, and I'm not complaining. What is my new thing?
Oh, we don't do overwhelm.
Right. So I don't do overwhelm. This is what Amy tells me I have to say. I don't do overwhelm. But this week has been super, super busy at work for both of us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it was to the point where I had to, everybody knows I love my morning routine. I get up at 5 o'clock, I do my reading, I do my journaling, and I do my workout. But it was to the point this week where I think it was Wednesday, I was at my desk at 5 a.m. And was it Wednesday? The kids were off were off from school. So I was like, you know what? I don't have to get them out the door. I'm going to go downstairs before my workout. Instead of doing my normal morning routine, I'm going to start working. And the night before, I made a list of the things that I wanted to do first thing, that I knew it was going to be nothing like too intense because I didn't want to sit there, for 3 hours. But I had some things that I knew I could get done in a short period of time. So I made my list the night before. I got up that morning, went down to my desk, worked for about an hour and a half. And in that quiet space, I got so much done.
Isn't it incredible?
It was amazing. Well, I'm just a morning person anyway, so I feel my best when I first wake up in the morning. But it was amazing how much I got done. And did I want to go to my desk at 5 a.m.? I did not.
No.
And even the day before, when I was doing my morning routine, but instead of doing my reading, cut out my reading, which I didn't want to do. And I just got one or two things done that I had to get done. But for me, it's sometimes hard to make that shift, even though I know it's temporary, to doing more work than I would do on a normal day. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why is because we have worked really, really hard to try and reinvent and recreate the identity that we have in creating this new practice that we have, is that we don't have to be the attorneys that are glued to our computers for 10, 12 hours a day. We don't have to be putting in these super long hours, and that's an identity that we kind of had ingrained in us because that's all that we knew prior to going out on our own and really being more intentional about our time. And so it's like you're fighting against what your former identity was. And then you're like, wait a second, but I have to do it again.
I feel like it's like we're going against everything we stand for.
Right.
When I have to,
yes.
When I get to my desk that early in the morning.
Are we traitors of ourselves?
Are we cheating on ourselves?
That's what it feels like. And no, I think that that's so true though. It's like you work really hard about not being that kind of person or not succumbing to that kind of got to be on first thing in the morning. Cause honestly, we know some people that are on there just so that they can email you and be like, oh, look at me. I'm up at 5 o'clock working on a file because I'm that dedicated.
And some people just work remember I had a conversation with somebody, I don't remember if I said this last week, 2 weeks ago, who was like, I haven't been on vacation in 3 years. And I was like, oh, what?
Bless your heart.
He takes no time off. He's always working, juggling a million things. And I almost start to panic when I feel like I have to spend more time doing work because I don't want to cross over into that, because I could work all day long.
Right.
For me, I could be a workaholic, and I used to be I could work all day, every day. And so when I do that, I kind of feel like I start to cross over into, I could sit here for the next 17 hours and do work.
That's interesting. Because not only is it you're trying to fight against a former identity, but you're also trying to fight against somebody that you don't want to become.
Right.
Because you can then say, oh, wow, this feels really good to get up at 5 and get this work done. And
And I'm not going to lie, I was so happy.
but here's the important, I think, takeaway here, because you and I don't want to be those people.
Right.
And so you need to be like consciously reminding yourself, like, this is a temporary fix to a temporary problem, not a permanent solution, because it could be a slippery slope for somebody too, like you, that you have this tendency of like, I could work all day. I could get up at 5 and I could get work done and I could be happy about that. But then where does that stop? Like, where do you draw that line, or where is it too far gone? Right.
Yeah. Like for me, I have to be conscious of and intentional about spending time with kids,
Right.
because I could be at my desk 24 hours a day and still have work to do and keep myself busy.
Yeah.
But I have to be conscious about how much time I'm spending doing that, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously I also want to make time for the kids
Right.
and be with them. And I have to do, schoolwork with them, and I have to make dinner and do all the things that we do
Right.
after work. And even last week, so the day that I got up at 5, I was at my desk till 8 p.m. It was such a long day. And I mean, I
Yeah.
took breaks in between, like, because the kids were home. So I like made them lunch and, took them to a friend's house. And like, so they were doing things. So I was, in and out. But then I went back to my desk and it was like 8 o'clock. And Kaylee was like, why are you working all the time? And in my head, I'm thinking, like, you don't even remember when I was working all the time.
Right.
Because I used to work for somebody else. And so I was not home. Like, I was out all day. And if they were off from school, I had to call my mom. I had to have somebody help, because
Yeah.
I wasn't home. I couldn't be home working. So I said to her, I'm like, you don't even know what that means. Like, you don't remember when I was not here.
Right.
But to her, because I make that conscious decision to get up from my desk at a certain time every day and be, in the kitchen and with them instead, to her, it looked like I was working 24 hours a day. And I
So
was like,
interesting.
wow, I don't want her to think this,
Yeah.
like, I actually felt bad.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to make that shift if you do have stuff to do, which I tried to explain to her. I said to her, I don't work like this all the time, right? Like, I'm not at
Mhm.
my desk till 8 o'clock every night.
Right.
Could I be? Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not, because I made the decision to, yes, we want to build this firm and run this business. But I don't want to be sitting here 24 hours a day. I
Yeah.
can't be.
Yeah.
Right.
And well, for you too, you have kids that are also in an age where they can occupy themselves. Like, I
Mhm.
don't think my kids would allow me to sit at my desk until 8 p.m. without my husband like tossing them into my office to be like, hello, remember them? No, but like, it's really interesting because it brings up another point, which is this: if you are trying to act, like, work in a certain way, right? Like how we're supposed to be building this firm and we want to make sure that we're really conscious of like all the hats that we're wearing, then if that feels good and that feels like we're aligned to that, then that's where we should be. Just because a temporary solution feels good doesn't mean that that's automatically the like long-term solution that you need.
Right. We don't need to extend it
Right.
past the temporary.
Because it might become something that starts to feel a little more neglecting from other people. And I
Yeah.
think Kaylee coming into you like that is kind of like that gentle reminder to you, like, mom, by the way, it's time to be mom. It's time to like draw that boundary.
And when she came, I didn't even realize what time it was.
That's
Like,
so
I didn't even
crazy.
realize how long I had been sitting
It's
there.
not surprising though. Like, you could really get lost in work like that.
And I like getting stuff done.
Yeah.
So when I had stuff done before they were even up that day, I was
Mhm.
like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I was so happy. But I have to say, so that was Wednesday. And then yesterday I had a very long mediation. I was in the office again. I was in the office all day. I was late to Matthew's football game. Kaylee was like, why are you working so late? And I was like, I got there at like 5:45, right?
Mhm.
I was exhausted last night. Even when I came here today, I was like, just out of it, just so tired, because it took a lot out of me this week, because I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So it is very temporary. But it was exhausting.
And I'm so glad that you brought this up, because you and I both had this same whirlwind of a week, and we had different things going on, but my Wednesday was so long because I had a really crazy real estate closing, and then I had to be in court at night, and I didn't get home and see the kids until like almost 8 o'clock. And then yesterday I had a deadline that I was working towards, and it just was a long day from between work and being very regimented with my time, and then having to switch gears and put my mom hat on and make sure that I was with Olivia, spending time with her at cheerleading and all this other stuff. And I woke up this morning and I was like, I just don't feel good at this pace anymore. Like
Yeah.
this. So while it might feel good in the moment, compiled over a couple of days, and like I even went so far as to get up early on Thursday, knowing I had my deadline. I got up at my 4:20 that I used to get up at, like back in the day
Remember
when we
those
were
days?
working in a firm. Yep. And we used to get up. We used to be ready before our kids were all up.
Yeah.
And I would be getting work done at home before I even got to the office. And I was doing that on Thursday because I knew what kind of day I was going to have. And I woke up today and I was like, I feel like garbage. And it was because I know it was productive in the moment, but over the course of a few days, it reminded me of like, this is not sustainable.
When you walked in here today, we were like, just
If you could
looked
see
at
our
each
faces
other.
right now, we were like,
Oh,
oh my
no.
God.
It was, yeah, it's just been, and to think that this used to be what we did.
Yeah.
Like, especially before I had kids, but even after, when they were little and I was working for somebody else, I had no choice.
Right.
But I was up at 4 o'clock, working out. And, it's not a schedule that I want to keep anymore.
No. And it's because our role has changed within the business. Obviously, we're in a different place now than we were 3-4 years ago when that was sustainable. We were doing it.
Mhm.
It really wasn't sustainable because we eventually burned and crashed from
We
that.
we didn't know any different.
We didn't know any different. But now knowing the difference, and now also having so many different stressors and new stressors in our life as business owners, it's just not realistic for us to try and maintain that. So I'm happy though that it was like it served its purpose, and that's great. But then it also served as a reminder of like, this is not a long-term thing.
And I still, even with this chaos, I have to, if you can see me on YouTube, I'm scooting back here. I want to get something out of my bag. Even with the chaos this week, right? I still did this, right? The highlighting and the blocks. And this
Mhm.
even helped me to see, even on those long days, I can see on paper, like how much time I'm spending.
Yeah.
And when it looks to be too much, I'm like, okay, let's see where I can cut this back a little bit. Right. So this was, again, tremendously helpful for me this week. It's helping me to see where I'm spending my time. But I had to do a little bit of a mindset shift, I guess you could call it this week, in terms of my hours, and recognizing that having to sit down at my desk at 5 a.m. was not permanent. It was just a temporary thing, and that I don't want to have to do that all the time. Right? Like, we are so blessed and so thankful to have a lot of work, a lot of great clients that we work for.
Yep.
And we both really enjoy our work, but it can take over your life.
Yeah.
Right.
If you let it, and you made the conscious, very intentional decision to do what you did this week, just like what I did this week, about being really mindful, couple of sacrifices, whether it be sleep, reading, spending a little bit of time with our family. But then it's like, okay, back on track next week. Let's get back to planning. Let's get back to making sure it's a productive week, but draw the boundaries where we need to draw the boundaries.
And I also recognize when I'm at my best, and that is first thing in the morning. And so when I was sitting at my desk at 8 o'clock, when Kayla came in to point out what time it was, I felt awful.
Yeah.
I was so tired, and anything that I'm doing at that time is not going to be very productive.
Right.
Like, I couldn't answer emails or, do some administrative stuff like that. But at that point, I was like, okay, there's only so much you can do in one day. And that's another thing, another mindset shift I've had to really, really work on. And this planner is helping me do that, because I can look at the time that I have and say, okay, there are a limited number of things that I'm going to be able to get done today.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. We have 24 hours. I'm not working all those 24 hours.
Right.
So there's a limited time to get stuff done. So it helps me prioritize. And I always do the most important things first thing in the morning. Like when I was up at 5 a.m. at my desk, they were things that weren't too intense, but they were super important that had to get done that day. There
Mhm.
was like no choice. I had to get it done. So I made sure they were done first thing because that's when I'm like my freshest.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like this was a great week for us to learn a bit about, how we can handle and like pivot from the stress and like what we can implement to make it manageable and also learn from it and perhaps take these kinds of tools and tips going forward and realizing what works and what doesn't work short term and long term.
And to recognize that there are going to be, hopefully, it's not a bad thing, like very busy seasons.
Yeah.
Our business, like any other business, has busy seasons and seasons that are a little bit slower. And during some seasons, I have to recognize that I just have to work more.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Like there's no way around it. If this is what I want to do and this is the business I want to build, this is how I have to work sometimes.
Yeah.
But then other times, making a conscious effort to not work like that, to take time and take some space from my desk, to actually breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
This week was not one of those weeks.
Nope.
Was not one of those weeks. But we just thought that maybe it would be helpful to come in here in real time and
Yeah.
talk about the kind of week we had, the stress and the pressure we were under, how we navigated through it, and how we're working to recognize that it's just temporary. So we hope these tips were helpful. We thank you for spending time with us, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.